is to search for the truth. The truth, it does not change. This trial is about the homicide of Joey Carnett. Last summer, July 18th, 2024, in the city of Appleton, off of Northland Avenue. John Pfeffer and Christy Cleland had known each other for about 15 years or so and were dating. That night, they were headed to Joey's house to play games and hang out. Joey was engaged to John's good friend, Samantha Krebs, the defendant in this case. John and Sam had known each other for a very long time, somewhere over 15 years. She was described like a sister to him in some ways, and in other ways, there was a romantic interest at times. They were both John Pfeffer and Samantha Krebs from the Wisconsin Rapids area. Even though Christy, who was dating John, had known him for a long time too, she had never met Sam or Sam's boyfriend, or actually fiance, Joey. So when Christy and John were headed over to Joey's house, Christy hadn't met Sam and hadn't met Joey. On the way to Joey's house, John was driving. Christy and John were listening to music, and John missed a couple calls from Samantha Krebs, the defendant. He realized he missed those calls when he was walking up to Joey's apartment right before they were going to enter. We know that Christy and John arrive at Joey's apartment at 9:46. When Christy and John arrive, they get buzzed up through one of the doors, like often happens in an apartment complex. They walk up a few of the steps, and Joey's apartment is right off to the left. John, who knows them, he goes first. He walks through the door, and he's followed by Christy. And that is where the truth begins to get twisted. That's where the stories diverge, where the truth diverges, and where your job truly begins. John's primary response, John Pfeffer, his primary response is to protect his friend, Samantha Krebs, the defendant, not rendering aid to Joey, not calling 911, but to protect Samantha. Immediately upon entering the apartment, Christy, who doesn't know either one, sees Joey lying on the kitchen floor, and she sees some blood. Christy is going to talk about how she had some nursing experience, so she begins to try to render aid. But it doesn't look good. You'll hear how she thought it already didn't look good. He was pale. At one time, he tried to get up. He was struggling to breathe. His pulse was weak as he laid there, and he went unconscious. She tried to grab a paper towel from the kitchen to absorb the blood and apply pressure. And she was trying to do what she could for Joey, who she had never met until that day, but it was too late. You'll hear that there wasn't a lot of blood coming out, but she knew it wasn't good and he didn't look good. You'll hear testimony from Dr. Kelly, who is a forensic pathologist, who will testify that he conducted the autopsy after Joey Carnett passed away, and that Joey's heart was punctured by a knife, just in the lower portion of his heart, where the entry right underneath his kind of chest area, under the left breast, there was a puncture wound, and it was deep, and it went to his heart. And it filled the sac portion of his heart, and he bled to death internally. Now, it's not until Sam leaves the apartment and starts driving away at 9:52 that John ever picks up the call to 911. Remember, they arrived there, you'll hear, at 9:46. You'll hear testimony that John called 911 at 9:54, over 7 minutes after arriving. 7 minutes quicker, Joey could have been provided medical care. And in that 911 call, John Pfeffer says, "I think Joey fell on a knife." The knife is put in the sink. At 9:59, the Appleton Police Department responds. Officer Lee was dispatched to Joey's apartment, and when he responds with another officer named Officer Thor. And they find Joey Carnut lying on the kitchen floor of his apartment with Christy rendering aid and trying to put pressure on that stab wound just underneath his left breast area. Officer Lee cuts off Joey's shirt and they apply a chest seal to stop what blood is coming out. And Officer Thor sees the knife in the sink. You'll hear testimony that the Appleton Police Department evidence group responded, and Fallon Garish is a forensic evidence specialist. She'll testify that she and her partner, Nicole DePlane, who is also a forensic evidence specialist, processed the scene. Fallon will testify that she collected the knife that was in the sink that John Pfeffer had put in there, and it was about 5 inches long. There is also another knife that was in the dishwasher that was about 8 inches long that was under a bunch of dishes in the dishwasher, but she collected that one too. Both of those knives, you'll hear testimony, were sent to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab for testing. Amber Lynn works at the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. She is a DNA analyst. And she will testify that she tested that 5-inch knife that John Pfeffer had put in the sink, and she tested it for DNA. The blade of the knife that entered into Joey's chest and punctured his heart comes back with his DNA. The handle on the knife comes back with both Joey and Sam's DNA. They both lived there. They both would have access to the knives, which Amber will discuss and explain. And Dr. Kelly said the wound when he saw the knife brought down for the autopsy, that Amber Lynn test that has Joey's DNA on the blade, is consistent with the type of injury that Joey Carnut had. You'll hear from 2 residents at the apartment complex, Chevalier Aguirre and Rhonda Stuckzander, who were home that evening and neighbors of Joey's and didn't hear anything. While officers were at the scene when they first responded, Gold Cross and the Appleton Police Department, or Gold Cross and the Appleton Fire Department also respond. And they too come and begin rendering aid, and they put a machine on Joey that provided chest compressions in the hopes of trying to save him while they were tending to him. Despite their best efforts, Joey passed away while they were there, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. While emergency aid was responding, the Appleton police officers are standing with Christy Cleland and John Pfeffer, who were there when law enforcement arrived. And you'll see video of John busy on his phone, on his smartphone. As he exits, you'll hear testimony how he gets a call. Sam's calling him while he's exiting the apartment, and he says he's with law enforcement. Sam, the defendant, the one who left. A short time later, she calls again. This time, Officer Felmer is standing with John Pfeffer. And John Pfeffer tells Sam on the call that he's standing with law enforcement. And she's talking to him, he's talking to her, and he gives Officer Felmer the phone with Sam on the other end. Before he does that, John tells Samantha that he's with officers so that she knows. And Officer Felmer gets on the phone, talks to Sam, and you will hear that call. You will listen to her demeanor, the comments she makes, the way she responds. Samantha is asking Officer Felmer, what's going on? Just a little bit after she left. What's going on? She says, I'm at a friend's. He says, can you come back? She's like, well, what's going on? And because things were so serious, they didn't want to explain it over the phone. And he said, we'll explain when you get here. Then Officer Felmer confirms her boyfriend's name and confirms that it's Joey. And she asks, is he okay? Officer Felmer says something happened to Joey. and she asks, is he okay? Then she starts talking, and you're going to listen to her demeanor about how he had a manic episode, was crazy earlier, was upset about a court date with his son. And then she responds, she left earlier in the night around 7 o'clock, long before anybody came, not just the short time before. You'll remember, and you'll hear testimony, that she left at 9:52, but she tells Officer Felmer it was 7. When she left, she knew Joey was on the floor. She knew he was bleeding. She knew he needed medical care. She then goes on, and you listen to her demeanor, and you'll hear what she has to say about how that Joey thought she was cheating on him, that he wasn't on meds because they didn't come in the mail, and he didn't have them for 24 hours. And then she says, is he okay? She knew he wasn't. And you'll listen to her demeanor. Well, should I go to the hospital? Officer Felmer says, I don't know what his medical state is. You remember, he's standing outside, but he doesn't tell her. And she says, well, what do you mean his medical state? At one point, she says, did he take something? She knows. He was bleeding on the floor in the kitchen when she left. Officer Felmer says that she was found with friends. We know John Pfeffer and Christy Cleland. She knows because she's talking to John Pfeffer. That's whose phone she called. And Officer Felmer says that when he was with friends, he collapsed. And she gasps. Well, what does that mean? And you'll hear her tone, and you'll listen to her demeanor. And then she says, did he take something?
All right, I want to turn quickly to Florida, where the defense rested its case.
Y'all can't hear me because I got my mic muted. Oops. Okay, so that's the prosecution's opening statement. That's what Court TV, I know. If it gets too wild, I can promise you I'll be out on them. But we will cover what we can. Hopefully it's everything. So what I got out of this is that, hey, Samantha actually allegedly stabbed him for whatever reason they had going on. Her good friend came over and he was helping her cover everything up, right? And let her leave the house. And he was over there with his girl, Christine. She don't know none of them. So she like, what is going on? She a nurse, and she just trying to render aid because she see this guy with this knife like stuck in his chest. So she leaves, Samantha leaves, and to my understanding, her friend wipes down the car, wipes down her phone, does all of this stuff to conceal that she was at the apartment. Like he was like accomplice, right? After the fact, because he was helping. So we do have a defense statement. Let me get that up here, and we will look at their opening statement and see how they are planning to combat this.
John Pfeffer and Christy Cleland. She knows that they were coming over to the apartment. They really did love each other. Actually gotten engaged.
My bad. Who'd you say? Please come back. Doing these mommy duties. Oh, goodness. I tell you, she about to miss the bus. I'm like, you better not miss this bus. Sorry. So I was up there. I tried to hurry up, get us in the courtroom because I still hear. And I'm like, she in there taking all her rollers. Like, you better do that on the bus. I'm sorry. I just forgot to unmute the court screen. But oh my goodness. Yeah. Girl, bye. You take them rollers off on the bus. Your fault. You better get up. Because I'm not taking nobody to school when no bus pick you up right outside the door. So sorry, guys. Here we go. I rewinded it. Oh, wee.
But like any relationship, theirs had problems. There were issues that existed. And some of those issues involved mental health concerns about Joey. He had some diagnoses and he was supposed to be taking medications, but wasn't always doing so. Some of the issues also involved use of controlled substances, quite frankly, by both parties. And throughout this trial, I anticipate that you're going to hear information about Samantha, about Joey, and about some of the other individuals involved in the case, that they're not perfect people. They have addiction issues, and that's something that they've all struggled with for quite some time. And you heard Attorney Templis tell you that you'll hear how Samantha was actually on supervision. And at this time, she had a probation agent that she was supposed to report to. And these are all things that are going on in her life and in the life of Joey. And one additional stressor that was occurring is that Joey was in a custody battle. He was fighting for some custody to be able to see the son that he had with another woman. And Sam was a part of that. She knew Joey's son, and she wanted him to be a part of Joey's life as well. She wanted them to be a family. They really did love each other. But on this night, on July 18th of 2024, the two of them were at the home that they shared together. And they were having a normal night for a period of time. And then kind of out of nowhere, something changed. Joey had told Samantha that he was going to meet up with his uncle. And Samantha had concerns about that. She had concerns about some of the activity that would take place if Joey did that. And you'll hear how she told him, you might not want to do that. That's not a good idea. And that conversation really flipped something for Joey. And an argument ensued. You'll hear how Samantha had told Joey that she was going to leave. And when she's doing that, you'll hear how she's sitting in the living room, which is semi-blocked off from the kitchen area, which is where Joey is. And Samantha's sitting on the couch getting her shoes on, and all of a sudden she sees something fly across the living room. And it's a sheath. It's a sheath to a knife set that the couple had just purchased, a brand new knife set. They had recently opened them and had put them away in their kitchen, and this was an object that Joey apparently had. And Samantha, you'll hear, is still getting ready to leave the apartment that night. And all of a sudden she looks up and she sees Joey coming out of the kitchen area and he's holding onto his side. You'll hear, realizes kind of what's happened. She doesn't know the severity of it, but she goes to Joey. She's concerned. She gets him on the ground. She grabs a paper towel out from underneath her sink and she's compressing his wound. Now, prior to this, earlier in the night when things were still good, Samantha had invited over her friend, John Pfeffer. And John Pfeffer that evening was with his maybe then girlfriend. I'm quite frankly not sure what you'll hear in that regard, but he was with his maybe then girlfriend, Christy Cleland. And so the two of them decide that they'll come.
You have to slow down.
Absolutely. The two of them decide that they will come over to Samantha's house that night to hang out with both her and Joey. Now they live a distance away. And so by the time that they make these arrangements to come over to Samantha's house, that's when the dynamic within the apartment is changing. By the time Samantha is on the ground with Joey, compressing the wound, she hears the buzzer, And she gets up to go and let in John Pfeffer and Christy Cleland. She knows that they were coming over to the apartment. She was expecting them. And so she buzzes them in and she goes back to Joey. And the recording that Attorney Templis had talked about picks up that first interaction of when John Pfeffer and Christy Cleland walk into the apartment. And nowhere on that initial recording, within the first seconds of when John Pfeffer walks in the door, do you hear Samantha say to him, "Tell the cops he stabbed himself." Now, Attorney Templis read to you what she believes that that recording says, but you'll get to hear a copy of it for yourself. And you'll get to determine what was actually said during those couple of minutes that were actually recorded. But I want to highlight that Attorney Templis had talked a lot about how the truth never changes. And quite frankly, you're going to hear a lot of different versions of this truth coming from John Pfeffer's mouth. He never tells a consistent story about what happened. And something that you're not going to hear, or I anticipate that you won't hear anything about during the course of this trial, is Samantha asking John Pfeffer to cover for her. What is told to the police initially and later on is all done at the hands of John Pfeffer. You won't hear anything about Samantha being involved in any type of plan to cover up what might have happened that night. You're not going to hear any evidence of that sort. So we go back to that evening. We have Sam over Joey holding onto his wound, and John Pfeffer and Christy Cleland walk in. There's this recording that takes place. But again, you'll hear how Samantha was on supervision at this time. And I also anticipate you'll hear how there were items in that apartment that shouldn't have been there. And John Pfeffer was aware of that. And you'll hear on a recording that he tells Samantha that she should leave.
All right, so obviously the defense telling of every different
for quite some time, several minutes. When he does call 911, the responders eventually arrive to the residence, and when they get there, they locate Joey on the floor, and they also find Christy Cleland and John Pfeffer. And both Christy and John are talked to by detectives on scene. They're taken outside of the apartment, and that's where they give their first statements. And again, these are statements that continuously change each time they are talked to by law enforcement. So the original statement that Samantha wasn't at the apartment that night comes from John Pfeffer. He tells police he has no idea where she is, that he thinks that she had been at a friend's house, and she was going to come back to the apartment to meet him there. At some point, while law enforcement is still on scene and John Pfeffer and Christy Cleland are outside with them, John calls Samantha, or Samantha calls him. There's a call that takes place. And this is the call that Attorney Templis referenced, where Officer Felmer ends up talking to Samantha. But prior to Samantha being on the phone with Officer Felmer, you'll hear what John is telling to her. And he's laying the groundwork, letting her know essentially what he's already told police so that her story is what he's told them. And he tells her, we got here, we found Joey on the ground, there's bleeding. And he tells her, you're going to be the number one suspect. You're the fiance. Fiancés are always the number one suspect. And so that conversation occurs before Officer Felmer gets on the phone line with Samantha. Attorney Templis has addressed a lot of what you will hear in terms, or a lot of what she believes you'll hear in terms of what Samantha's demeanor was like following this incident. But we've already talked about in jury selection how everybody responds to things differently. There's no right way, and there's no one way to respond. And so you will see different actions and different statements that Samantha had made regarding this evening in the days that followed it. They're asking you to pay attention to evidence that you'll see about Samantha hanging out at her friend's house in the days afterwards, about her driving away from the scene in a vehicle that had stickers on it at one point. But again, what you're not going to hear throughout the duration of this trial is that Samantha asked anybody to cover for her. You're going to hear that she is essentially trying to cope with something very tragic that she just witnessed. It was the tragic death of her fiance. Again, somebody that she was in love with and was planning on spending the rest of her life with. Samantha went to that friend's house, Jeff Hayes' house, and again, she stayed there until she was going to be able to report to her probation agent. She was trying to do what she thought was best, and she was essentially relying on advice from people that she thought were her friends. We've talked a lot now in opening statements. It's really a roadmap for what the attorneys expect that you will hear throughout the duration of the trial. Some wise man that I work with always explains opening statements as a bookend. So first we tell you what we think you're going to hear, then you hear it for yourselves. And then at the end of the case, in closing arguments, we come back up here again and tell you what you just heard. But again, just flipping to some of the things that I want you, or I'm asking you to pay attention to, things that I don't think you will hear anything about. You're not going to hear anything about text messages or phone calls between Jeffrey Hayes and John Pfeffer, where the two of them are planning some conspiracy to cover up for anything that Samantha might have done. Now, there are phone calls that occur and a text message saying 911, this is an emergency that happened that night, but there's no response to them, no immediate response, and there's no other further follow-up conversations between the two. There's no, Attorney Templis has said that the truth never changes, but the fact of the matter is that you're not going to hear any consistent truth. So really no truth, because there's no consistent version of anything that John Pfeffer says happened. You're not going to hear anything about there being some type of physical altercation on the night of July 18th, 2024 between Samantha and Joey. In fact, you're really not going to hear about any physical arguments happening between the two in the past at all. You're not going to hear about any defensive wounds that Joey would have had to his body. There's just one single stab mark. You're not going to hear any testimony again about Samantha asking anybody to cover up for her. You're not going to hear that Samantha would have had any motive to harm Joey in any way. You're not going to hear anything that would lend you, or I think find you to believe that Samantha would have had any intention of harming Joey in any way. None of that exists here. Attorney Templis got up here and she said that your job as jurors, and I agree, is to find the truth. And the fact of the matter is that the truth in this case is that there was no homicide. What happened to Joey Carnot was, quite frankly, a tragic accident. It was suicide. And whether it was accidental or intentional, it is not something that Samantha participated in. The truth is that Samantha did not kill him. She did not harm him. And when I get back up here at the end of this case and closing arguments, I will find or ask you to agree with me on that. I will ask you to find Samantha not guilty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.